Yo, my peoples, how are we doing on my YouTube channel once again? We've got a special guest in, Alex Goldberg. We've collabed quite a few times, haven't we, Alex?
I can't think of any occasions we've collaborated, actually.
Yeah, it's not like we do a podcast after every game together or anything like that. Of course, this is the Frank Lampard assessment. I did a squad breakdown with Son of Chelsea last week, and I thought to myself, no better time really than the international break to assess Frank Lampard. You know, this is the second international break now. This is the last one as well, thank God, because I'm getting sick of them. I'm not going to lie. We're going into a really heavy Christmas period coming up, so it's great to be able to now speak on him and just give a nice balanced take on how he's been doing so far. So obviously, start of the season has been up and down. We've definitely, we're not top of the table, so clearly there's things to improve. But I think regarding the fact that we didn't have much of a preseason, we've got a lot of new signings from different countries and different, different playing styles as well. I think so far he's done very good. I don't know if you agree with that, Alex, just on a very subsurface level.
I do. I totally agree. I think he's been a good overall manager. And what I mean by that is definitely there's still some decisions I'll look back on at the start of the season where I disagree with what he did. Maybe tactically some games he didn't show enough or just showed the wrong things. However, I think especially on Twitter, we like to ignore when he has good games as an actual manager, whether it's his decision before game, maybe he makes a couple good substitutions, which he's done so far this season. We like to ignore those when we had fun critiquing him weeks before. So He has been in the manager sense, like what their job is to actually coach the team on the pitch. I think he's been pretty good. But where he's been better has certainly been what you could call not actually managing right now, but all of his signings. So his talent ID, like we like to say on Twitter, his talent ID has been so freaking massive in all the positivity that we've had in his fan base lately about this team. So in some ways, they've almost been the saviors. Not to say the players that were already here have been the bad ones, but obviously the season started off rougher than we wanted. And really the first three initial saviors were the three defensive signings of Frank's. So Thiago Silva, Chilwell, two people that we know he really wanted in different ways. Chilwell, I mean, it was documented for so long. And God, he looks so good on that one, Frank does. And Thiago, later materialized. However, we've now heard about his pitch to Thiago and how important has that been. So the reason why I want to give Frank credit now for this is, he envisioned the pluses of a Thiago Silva in a dressing room. He envisioned how Chilwell, and this is important, would play in his system. I had someone on the byline who's a Leicester City fan who said, well, we held Chilwell back at Leicester City. Well, clearly Frank thought that too, Matisse, because now Chilwell's in his system and looking really damn good.
Yeah.
Right. I think Mendy, better check, but overall, he just looks so good for the signings.
Yeah, I want to speak about the signings because obviously that's the first part of the season is to obviously get the right players in, and I think we have to really just accept and understand just how important his pull power has been in these signings, because I've seen people not want to give him credit where it's due for even just not getting these players in, which has been incredible. I think this is probably one of our best transfer windows. You can throw it up with Jose Mourinho's first stint as well. That transfer window was pretty incredible, but for me, this is definitely top two. It's between those two head to head. And we've had managers in the past where they've wanted players and not been able to convince the board that they should go ahead and get them. So Frank Lampard's clearly got a lot of pull power that he's bringing to the club. And I think all the players have said it so far, Frank is the reason. And a lot of people are saying that, they're just saying that to say that, but I don't, what's your take on that? Because I don't believe that's true.
No, I'm glad you bring this up because just last night I watched on YouTube Ben Chilwell's EA Sports video where he is supposed to guess the ratings of some of his teammates in the game. And he admits he doesn't play the game. That has nothing to do with anything. But one of the questions that was being asked to him was, of course, about the decision to come to Chelsea. And he's answered this question probably 1,000 times by now, just in terms of he's a player that's going to get interviewed a lot when you make this move. However, he, of course, mentions, the manager was a big reason. And I only watched it once, but he almost makes a point, like takes a second that he didn't need to say that was a common theme between all the signings. And like he had spoken to them as well. Like, yeah, Frank was a big reason for us too. So it's not necessarily this thing that we're dreaming up or we're hearing them individually say, yeah, the manager was a big deal for us. So, that's why we came. No. Like apparently they're also saying it to each other. These new signings are also saying like, yeah, the gaffer was a huge pull for us, a huge reason we want to play with him. So what I think is so cool about that is they all have their own stories behind maybe their first initial talks with Frank. Ziyech's happened at a much more unique time because the window was closed and it was mid-season and they had just faced each other in the Champions League. But we keep hearing that they really thought well on the same like footballing playing field, meaning they really thought similar, especially in terms of how Frank wanted to use Hakeem. So, Hakeem's been definitely approached to some extent by other teams these past few years. He's been on the map, but clearly something between him and Frank, it hit different or it just felt completely right. And Joel, I already spoke about it, courted. I'm sure they knew each other for a long time. And Thiago Silva, it's more they were almost colleagues of each other. So they all have their own story. We've heard about his approaches to Timo and Kai. So I just think it speaks so much to, of course, his pull power, but there are other legends in the game managing. I think he needs more than pull power. He needs the ability to be personable and to speak directly and communicate to his players. And that's what he needs with his team just week in, week out. And that's what he needs with the media. And that's also what he had with the signings. So that's a common trait of Frank's that seems to really be working for him across all aspects of being a manager.
Yeah, I completely agree. And people underplay. Not only is he, he's a midfielder that shaped, this generation for English football. Do you know what I mean? People talk about him, Gerrard. Those are the names that people got on the back of their shirts. He is a legend of the game and he's known globally. So, players know who this guy is and they know what he's done in his career. They respect his career and everybody knows how his career started at West Ham. Obviously, the whole Harry Redknapp moment. He wasn't exactly, just godly gifted with these talents. He had to work very hard to make it in this game and to reach the heights that he's reached. And personally wise, people don't speak about it enough. The way that he handles the media, the way that he seems to make it the way that he goes after these players, these phone calls that we hear about, the convincing of the player, the continue to speak about his philosophy all the time to them as well. He's doing very personable things behind the scenes. I don't think, obviously people won't know, so they won't give him the credit for it, but it's not a simple fact of Chelsea have money and they're going to spend it correctly, because we've seen in previous years, Chelsea have had money before, they've spent money, but they haven't bought the right players. And I think right now you have to give credit for Frank to actually get the players in, yes, but actually know what he wants to do with these players. Because another thing I want to touch on now going into the season, obviously starting against Brighton, obviously a great win. We've seen Mason Mount at the start of the season out wide a lot. And it's really only now that Hakeem Ziyech has come back fit that maybe we can understand why this was happening. Obviously he liked Willian. He wanted to keep Willian as well. He was used as this defensive contribution to give balance to the attack. We've seen it a lot when Hazard was here as well. Managers would use Willian on the right hand side to bring a bit of balance to the team, to do the defensive work rate, to track back so we weren't outnumbered in midfield. And potentially, we didn't give Willian enough credit for that, or we didn't maybe acknowledge Willian's role in the team and that he wasn't this guy that was meant to get output in the final third. I personally still feel like, he should have been contributing more, but his role maybe wasn't to do that. Do you feel like Mount was being used in a similar role at the start of the season, and it's only really until Hakeem Ziyech come into the team where he does offer that as well, that's the reasoning behind it for Frank?
1,000%. Because I actually think Frank already answered the question. He answered the question technically about Callum, but we're specifically talking about Hakeem and Mason. And even Pulisic was then affected by it because he was playing on the other side. But he answered the question when he was finally asked about Callum's playing time, and he mentioned Willian. So, yeah, you're totally right to bring Willian up. He said, look at the things that Willian was doing for us last season. And I thought that was quite telling, because then Mount playing on a wing or just out wide, well, yep, Mount's your next closest. Well, you could even argue he's better at this last season than Willian, but he is your other player who's going to press high up the pitch. And that was something that Willian was good at. It wasn't just he would motor around. Like, he had an intelligence about how to close down angles. Obviously he did, because managers who have valued that in the past loved Willian. So we may not like to hear it, but Willian knew what he was doing in that regard. Mount certainly does. Frank trusts him there. And I just think that continues the theme of what Frank wanted to do at the start of the season. He wanted to have trust. He wanted to not lose games 3-0, 4-0. He wanted to keep things stabilized until, of course, Ziyech got back fit. Now, Matisse, we'll never know. I don't think Frank will ever tell us. Maybe once he's retired, hopefully decades from now, in a tell-all book. But we'll never know what the plan would have been had Hakim Ziyech been fit to start the season. Would we have had this big uproar? Would Mount have been out wide? Would it have been a 4-3-3 right away? Because I'm not going to say it any more than I have, but you and I on the pod, we started our post-pods when I think the Southampton draw happened, which felt like a loss, and then two more draws, Sevilla United, but we were still seeing Mount, of course, out wide. And I said, well, Ziyech is about to be fit, and Frank wanted all these signings, but he wanted Mount. So what's the plan? And who knows? Who knows? He still may have played Mount a little bit out wide to start the season, even with all those cast of characters fit, because maybe it was just about still prioritizing the defense and know you can keep a clean sheet, maybe. But I still think we would have seen a little bit more, obviously, of Ziyech starting. So Mount may have played in the midfield. Now, lastly, this is what I said in my first answer about Frank. Like, I didn't agree with everything Frank did, just because I now look back at it and say, you know what, Frank, you were right overall to go with a cautious approach, make sure you can keep a clean sheet, build from the back, keep confidence. I totally get it. I agree with that overall approach, but I still wouldn't have played Mason. I think it was like 5 games in a row, every second out wide. Yeah. I mean, he just made it so hard on Mount in particular. So everybody knows me as a Mason Mount fanboy. So selfishly, I just thought it was unfair on Mason. So I don't agree with all of it. However, I do. Hindsight is 2020, Matisse. And I do now, when you remember that Ziyech wasn't fit, I do now at least understand where Frank was coming from.
Yeah, and that's a great point that I want to get onto about his management of players. Obviously, in the chat, as always, we do like to engage with you, so please do drop any questions that you've got, and I'll get to them as well. I've got my own segments, but of course, I want to incorporate you guys as always, as per usual. Getting onto his the management of players now. Frank's been really good in the media of shielding players from criticism. In the past, we've had a lot of drama in the media with former managers in the terms of the criticism of players. We've managed to spike it out of control. I remember when Barkley took that penalty against Valencia, I believe, and it was, we managed to, turn that into a whole thing and really just dial it down to, Barkley was the first choice penalty taker. We knew he wasn't, but, we managed to keep that under wraps. And he's done that quite a few times. He's protected Kepa a lot in the media as well at the start of the season when he was starting games despite the performances. So he's been very good at defending players in the media and publicly. But one thing I do want to get onto is his treatment of players in terms of freezing them out of the team, and whether does it make any sense to you, and whether it's what's the logical reason behind it. So we've got obviously Giroud from last season when he was third choice behind Batshuayi. Giroud obviously this season hasn't featured at all that much as well. Tomori, another player who's really been frozen out. It's very hard to tell why. Again, he was in a decent run of form at the start of last season, then he didn't kick a ball again really for the rest of the season. Mateo Kovacic, who halfway through the season couldn't get a look in as well, but then he came back into the team. And then obviously this season you've got Hudson-Odoi who's not playing too much either. What is it, a training thing? What do you think it is where Frank will just randomly isolate a player kind of and not use them? Obviously we know Marcus Alonso is another one, but there's a reason for that because of the whole team bus incident. What do you think about it? Yeah,
I think last season's reasons have to be different than this season's. I really do. Maybe there's a theme. However, I think last season, Frank was brand new. I don't think. He was brand new to the Chelsea job. Also, this team was brand new. I don't need to say the situation. It was just, wow, between the youngsters, the loanees, the players that were already there. So new. So I think some of it was Frank obviously trying to figure out who he can trust, who he can't, where he likes players in certain situations. However, we know Chelsea were hit hardest last season with injuries, significant injuries, like an actual stat. So they were highest in that category among the classic Big Six. I'm not sure about all teams, but it was the worst type of injuries as well because they were horribly timed injuries. Once one came back fit, 2 were out injured again. So who knows if that messed with him, but you're specifically asking about the freezing out. And yeah, it's an interesting subject on someone like Tomori, like you mentioned. He's a regular, and then boom, he's not playing again. I always give you credit for the phrase you used. Rudiger was shoehorned, as you said, right back into the team, and he really was. So for me, that one specifically, we just want to isolate that one. That one I don't agree with. However, I think it was obvious. The team was super young, and Frank felt, I think, way too compelled to have a senior member back in the starting 11. And maybe he also rated him more than he does now. So on the Tomori front, though, well, he's not playing now, Frank. Okay, but now, Matisse, once again, it becomes cloudy because, well, we know now this season, the reason why I said last season's reasons and this season's reasons I think are very different is now I think it's clear Frank is trying to hone in on a core right now. And Frank is actually doing exactly what we requested him to do when the window shut, and we were a little upset we couldn't get rid of a left back and a center back because we all still think it's absolutely insane. We have 3 senior left backs, not including Azpilicueta, and 5 senior center backs, not including all the other young ones out on loan or at the academy. So it's crazy. We were all like, okay, Frank, well, ignore that. Pretend that some of those players just aren't there. Ignore it, because let's play our team here. Let's play the players you trust. So I think Frank is following that really closely. Now, some could say, fine, Alex, I get it. I agree with you. He should hone in on a regular starting 11, then a couple subs. But still, could he get a little bit more playing time to Giroud? Could Tomori be the third string center back? Could Kovacic somehow get more starts? Well, I think they all have their own cases. Like with Giroud, you and I have spoken about it a lot. Tammy's not going to be third string. He's just not going to be third string. There's politics behind it. However, those politics behind it, him not having signed a contract yet, but also being a young, valuable asset who you would want to only get better from his good first season with Chelsea last season. There are reasons that are football related as to why Tammy shouldn't be third string, and also probably value, asset, business, financial stuff behind that. But you have to accept it because Tammy's performing. And with Giroud, we've spoken about it. He wants to be the starting striker at the Euros for France. So I think until he truly feels like that's out of question, it's not that big of a question on that specific one. And then the Kovacic thing, I'm not going to go through all of them, but it's just it's a different example of, well, class player. However, should we be that surprised by it when myself, you, others were predicting that he would be a victim of circumstance? We were all predicting that. So why are we all surprised by it now? We also, many people knew Frank wanted to play a 4-3-3. Frank is always going to want to start Mount. Of course, he's going to want to start Kai. Frank, above all, is going to start Conte over Jorginho and Kovacic. Oh, we know that. Every manager is going to start N'Golo Conte over Jorginho and Kovacic, maybe bar sorry on Jorginho, but he'll still start Conte a crap load. No manager has ever been able to sit N'Golo Conte. I think N'Golo Conte, don't quote me, I think he's leading us in minutes in the Premier League this season, or he's right near the top, and he still has been managed a little bit more than in the past. I mean, we knew these things ahead of time. So I think if Mateo Kovacic didn't win player of the season, well, we would still know he's class. I'm not saying he's not class, but I think there would be that sentence that can't be said so much on Twitter. And you know what that sentence is, Matisse. He's our player of the season, and he's not playing. Or he's our player of the season, and he's not a starter. So they're harping so much on the player of the season part when Willian was our player of the season, I think multiple times, and we never wanted him to start. So I just think some of the requests about players needing to play more are actually contradicting to either your initial beliefs or the other requests you have for Frank. So listen, I think Fick should be third string center back as well, but maybe that's a political part. Rudiger, let's get a little value up for him so we can sell him. Christensen, I don't know. But then again, Tomori, they wanted to send him on loan to West Ham and he rejected it. So read him between the lines there. What I'm trying to say is overall, the fact that he is honing in on a core group, I like. And then the other ones, yeah, I'd want Calum to play more. I'd want Fick to play more. But I'm just not too bothered by it because they're not complete mysteries to me, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah, you kind of understand the logic of what's going on behind the scenes there. I'm going to get into a few of the questions from the chat because there are quite a few. This one, first one from Zippy. How many years do you think Frank Lampard will be at Chelsea? It's an interesting one. I'll let you take that one first, Alex. How long do you, because obviously it's easy to dream and say this is going to be Sir Alex Ferguson 2.0, but that's very unlikely to happen just because this is not even Chelsea Football Club. This is just a modern era of football. Managers just don't get that long. Obviously right now Klopp is on a really good stint, I'd say, for time-wise at Liverpool. Same with Pep at City. How long do you think Frank Lampard will get at Chelsea or will be here for?
This is always such a tough question to answer because it's Chelsea. If you were to think of another team, and I know in general football managers could be hired one day, sacked the next, but there are some managers now who are managing teams like even Sean Dyche at Burnley, who have been there for a while. So, and you could argue actually those clubs, it's easier to stay there longer. Fine, I hear you. However, I do think that if there's ever a manager who is going to have a long time at Chelsea, it's going to be Frank. I said that before he was hired. I'll certainly say that now. Because, I mean, the ages of these players that Frank has decided to include into his first team would make you think that the club, as long as things didn't blow up and go a horrible route, they would want Frank to progress with those players. That's what I've always kind of viewed it as actually Frank is almost just like the young players we like, where they're hoping he improves and improves and improves and then gets better with this team, which is better than him, if you know what I mean. Like now our team on paper is actually better than he is a manager, but he's still hugely responsible for that team being better than he is as a manager. So I think as long as things don't get really bad, we know Chelsea do care about optics, so they'll always be weighing it up. They're already grading him like any other manager because it's year 2. But man, to answer Zippy's question, good account by the way. All right, I'm going to set an over-under. I'm not going to put an actual number of years, but I'll set an over-under. And it might seem steep, it might seem high to people, but I'm gonna say 5.5 years. Yeah. Okay. And there could be some people absolutely laughing at this, saying, hey, he's not staying any longer than 1.5 more years. But no, 5.5 years, and I'm taking the over. People know I'm optimistic on this whole entire new era of Chelsea, so I have to be authentic, and I truly believe it. 5.5 years, and I'm taking the over.
I'm gonna give it 4. Mainly because I want to, like you said, and this is a really good point that you made. Is he going to become a top manager? Because he's got a world-class squad now, or borderline world-class squad. When these guys, especially the young guys, get into their prime, it's going to be very interesting to see if he becomes a world-class coach. Because I think that would be one thing that people will say right now, and a lot of people have said, I want to get your opinion on this. Chelsea usually have world-class coaches. Do you feel like Frank will become a world-class coach in time for Chelsea? Or do you feel like he is the stepping stone, which a lot of people have brought up? Is he the stepping stone manager to, great, you're going to get all your players in, the world-class players, you're going to use your pull power to get them in, and then we're going to go and get one of these other managers that people talk about?
See, missed me with that, honestly. I think there's a culture on Twitter who tries to act like they're true experts of the game, and they see the game better than people in the game. And they are visionaries, you know, the type of accounts I'm talking about. Really, they've decided that Frank, because he was a great player and he's not yet a tactical expert, well, he can't become one. And someone that famous, that's almost too generic. We need somebody who has a little bit of a unique story, a harder story, somebody who might play a very specific type of football. Nah, missed me. You all think you're experts on this stuff. I'm not saying Frank will become a great manager, but people who are just saying so confidently that he's a stepping stone, I just think have not really wanted to even believe that he could prove them wrong to begin with. So that's my feeling on that. And I absolutely think that managers who win titles are all different types of managers. They're not all people who know how to play every formation flawlessly or have one formation they hone in on and it's flawless. Because, by the way, some of those managers don't have plan Bs. They don't have plan Bs. They get exposed after a while. So Frank, he has certainly showed us that he will try different things out. I think he's been his own worst enemy at times, because I said it last season. I thought he had some, tactical masterclasses last season. And then Matisse, I thought he tried to replicate them too much. That's where he's going to have to learn. He's a smart freaking guy. And I don't care about the IQ garbage. It means nothing to me, honestly, except for the fact that I know he is somebody who's well thought and he likes to think of all sides of a problem. He likes to think of how to solve problems. he's definitely somebody who analyzes others and his own performance. So I'm sure that gets into why he has a high IQ, but I care much more about the type of player he was mentally, the way he read the game then. And I think he has absolutely the mind to become somebody who week in, week out, the opponent fears as well. Like when we face other teams, might actually fear their manager more than the team. Like that's certainly happened before. So, I mean, I'll use an extreme example. Say City was really injured, but it's Pep.
Yeah, exactly.
City's really injured, but it's Pep. And now, granted, those are still going to be great players, but Pep would still, let's put it this way. Pep with a worse team, actually, that probably scares me more, Matisse, because we know how Chelsea play against bad teams. So that actually probably scares me more. But like Chris Wilder, I know that Sheffield United are not off to a great start. Still scares me as a manager. So I do think Frank can get to the point where the opponent says, no, that's a good manager too. And by the way, the reason why I think that is going to, he needs to just become, in my opinion, a good coach. So I'll separate manager from coach. So you're talking about like truly coaching football. I think he needs to become a good coach to make him a great manager, if that makes sense. So Zidane, I'm not at all trying to do a hardcore parallel here, and I know Real Madrid have great toys at his disposal, but he has won the biggest trophies, and many people will tell you, well, tactically, he's not all that great. Okay, fine. I want Frank to be pretty good. I want him to, I'll say again, I want him to be at least a good coach. And if he's a good coach, he will be a great manager.
Yeah, because of all those other traits that we spoke about before, his personality, what he's done, behind the scenes as well, that doesn't get a look in too much.
But on Twitter, but Matisse, on Twitter, those things mean nothing. Those things are made fun of. It's all about the X's and O's. If you're actually well liked or you speak well, for some reason, to some, that actually makes you more hated. You just have to be that raw character who only knows about playbooks. Miss me.
And this is another question that's coming here. This is a good one for me because it's an interesting topic, because Pulisic's recent injury record as a whole is quite sketchy. It's certainly something to be worried about. It's the only thing to be worried about when we talk about Pulisic's game. It's going to be interesting to see what Frank Lampard does, and obviously Callum Hudson-Odoi is not favoured at the moment. That's quite evident. I'm not sure in terms of how low he is in the pecking order, but he could potentially be bottom of the pecking order when it comes to wingers. I don't know if he would go with Callum or Mount as his backup winger after Werner, Pulisic and Ziyech. That would be very interesting to find out. So he could be fourth or fifth choice in that position. I'd hope it'd be fourth. I'd hope he'd not move Mount again for the sake of Mount, regardless of Callum. Do you think we need another winger? Because we was linked with Benrahma. We was linked with really just Benrahma that I could see from a winger standpoint. But if this injury issue for Pulisic and obviously Hudson-Odoi maybe not being Frank's cup of tea right now, what do you think of this situation building up here?
Yeah, it's possible. I mean, I will say we just don't know yet about the whole Mount Hudson-Odoi thing in the 4-3-3. I'd like to be an optimist and say that Mount, if it's a 4-3-3, is always going to be an 8, because Frank can value what he brings out wide no matter the formation. But I'm pretty sure Frank values what he brings as an 8 if they're playing that formation above all. So I am an optimist saying that also then the 4-3-3 really calls for a more traditional winger than maybe a 4-2-3-1 anyway. For anybody who plays FIFA, 4-3-3, it's a little bit more of a left winger. 4-2-3-1, it's a little bit more of a left mid. So Callum certainly seems a bit more like a left winger than a left mid, if you follow me there. So to get to the second part of your question, I will in a second, but I'm just saying that I still have hope that Callum still might be behind Pulisic and Werner as a left winger, and then Ziyech on the right. So I'm still not saying that even if there was an injury, Callum would definitely get a start, but I don't think he's behind Mount. I know there'll be a lot of cynics who are like, come on, Alex, Frank. Of course he's behind Mount. But no, in the 4-3-3, I'd like to believe he's not behind Mount, because, listen, Frank values his talent. Like, he is rated. He is rated at the club. It's finite things. It's intricate things that have kind of worked against Callum and maybe other small things. However, in a 4-3-3, I'll remain optimistic that Callum is at least the left winger before Mount is. Now, do we need an extra winger? Well, Matisse, I got to be real with you. I'm worried about Pulisic's injuries because it is constant. Just go on any website, like transfermarket.com. Go look at his injuries. It's just small things after small things from the beginning of the Dortmund days to now. And the optimist in me says, well, it's because he's young. His body's just still kind of figuring itself out. It could just absolutely disappear later this season, next season. He could have a clean bill of health for 8 years. Could. But when I look at him, he doesn't have the lower half of Eden Hazard Willian. I'm not saying he's completely weak, but he doesn't have that durable, almost thick lower half that those guys have. His father on my podcast, before he ever played a game for Chelsea, sounded not concerned, but certainly mindful. Christian needed to put on weight and strength. So maybe he's getting there, and then once he fully does, he'll be fine. But you can't depend, unfortunately, you can't depend on Christian Pulisic to be a consistent Chelsea player. When he's playing, when he's playing, you can depend on him to be one of your best players, if not the best. However, the saying goes, sometimes the best ability is availability. And right now, Pulisic does not have that. So you got to think about it. You certainly have to think about it, because in an emergency situation, of course, you have Werner to play on the wing. You have Callum, but if you want to even say Callum's not going to happen, you have Werner, you have Ziyech, okay, and then you have Mount and Havertz, who can also play on the wing. But that is far from ideal, especially in a 4-2-3-1. Maybe Havertz as a right winger in a 4-3-3 works a bit. But no, I don't even want to entertain those guys having to move out to the wing, because I'm so happy with them in the 8 positions in a 4-3-3. So yeah, you have to think about it. You certainly do. I think that on paper, when everyone's fit, this team is absolutely incredible. I've said it before, probably the best talent in the Premier League on paper when everyone's fit. But the moment you start to miss a few players in the attack, especially in the defense, you'll see it's not as deep as you would want it. So winger is a spot you have to worry about, just depth-wise. And here's one fact. Anybody watching this, you can go make sure if this is correct. So I'm not saying this is 1,000% correct, but someone told me that I very much trust that so far Pulisic has been unavailable for games due to injury more than Eden Hazard was in his entire Chelsea career. So that's not to say Eden didn't miss games because he was being rested, but due to injury, Christian Pulisic has already been unavailable more games in a Chelsea shirt than Hazard was in his whole entire career. That is impressive on Eden's part. We know that. His durability record was phenomenal. But I'm sorry, that's like 7 seasons to Pulisic's not even 2 full seasons. That's very concerning.
Yeah, no, 100%. It's something that a lot of people have been bringing up recently, especially after last night. Obviously, Hudson-Odoi played very well for the England under 21s. Granted, the opposition weren't great. It's going to be interesting because, like we've said, we haven't seen too much of Hudson-Odoi, even when Pulisic and Ziyech weren't available. So for him to now, be in the pecking order above them when they're fit is unlikely. So I think people are very interested to see if now Chelsea will go for another winger. Obviously, Mount, this is a really good comment. Mount will never play in the wings again. Emerson and Havertz can play in the wings, though. I think Emerson was tried there off the bench, and he was at right wing as well, which was quite interesting to see. So it'd be interesting to see if he uses him for defensive balance. Like I've said before, I think Alonso is definitely third choice now for obvious reasons. Not only is he not a left back, but also the storm he kicked up coming off the pitch and just going straight to the team bus. I don't think he's exactly favoured right now by Frank or the coaching
quickly,
staff.
I just want to say on that comment, good comment. I hope if it's a 4-3-3, Mount won't ever play on the wings again. I think Kai in a 4-3-3 would be more likely to play right wing than Mount would to be left wing or right wing. So good comment by that viewer. He mentions Emerson. I don't want to see it. But I just want to recall, I think a week ago or so, The Athletic reported that Tino Andrin would be potentially available at the 8 spot or left wing. I'm pretty sure was the report. So maybe there is an emergency depth option. And honestly, if you had a pretty experienced team around Tino, give it a go. He's really talented.
Yeah, and I want to get onto midfielders now, especially midfielders coming through. I did a little piece of 7 loanees most likely to disturb this current first team squad. Of course, the experienced Ross Barkley and Loftus-Cheek you have to include just because of the sheer talent. Ross Barkley in particular is doing very well at Aston Villa. Personally, I felt like they would sell him for a high price, but you never know. Frank Lampard does like Ross Barkley, so this could be just a way of getting him back into form before he returns. Lampard is a midfielder, obviously as a player. one of the greatest to ever grace the game. So midfield is always the hot topic of how he's going to structure his midfield going forward. We've had Kante at lone DM. We've had a double pivot. We've had obviously Mason Mount coming back into the 8, and that's for me his best position. Kai being used as a right-sided 8 as well instead of playing 10. Is there anybody in the youth academy? You spoke about Tino already. Conor Gallagher's another name that's come up, obviously, because of West Brom. Ethan Ampadu is another player. Do you, from what you know about Frank, obviously Declan Rice links as well, do you feel like these players have a chance to break into this 8 role or DM role under Frank, knowing that how he wants to structure his midfield just from his playing days as well with Mikel, Makalele, SCM, Ballack? That seems to be what he's trying to sync up.
Conor Gallagher, this formation definitely benefits him, no doubt about it. Playing pretty well for West Brom. They're a crap team, let's be real. And I don't think he's done too much in the actual statistics, like goals and assists category. However, you're watching these games, he's playing how you'd want a true 8 to play. He's totally up for a tackle. He's totally up for ball progression. Like he kind of does. When I say he's a complete midfielder, I'm not saying like at Premier League level, but what I'm saying is he does a lot of things in the midfield. He plays with a good tenacity. He has a lot of confidence. He's a smart player, and he definitely can be an 8. Like I think overall you could just call him a midfielder, but an 8, yeah, that really does fit his game well. So I thought right from the get-go, 4-3-3, even though I'm not ever saying that Conor Gallagher is definitely going to make it at Chelsea. I'm not saying that, but I'm just saying that the switch to a 4-3-3 benefited him. And so far, out on loan, he's been a good player. So I'm not just saying at West Brom. Obviously, last season, 2 different loans, split the season, Charlton, then Swansea, which is difficult to do. I don't care that it's the championship. That's difficult to do, and it was class at both. So we rated when our current youngsters in the first team did well in the championship. We got to give Conor Gallagher credit for that. Certainly, he was a Academy Player of the Year for Chelsea as well. So for him, Now, technically, Barkley and Loftus-Cheek are benefited by the 4-3-3 switch. They want to have futures at Chelsea. They are benefited by that because it does tailor to, I think, their preferred position as well. Maybe actually Barkley's more of a 10. To be honest, you see him play for Villa, and maybe he is more of a 10 who doesn't have to do all aspects of the game. I don't know, but he can be an 8. He can, and we saw him with Chelsea, and not a lot, but a few games, be the 8 with Mount, and then it was Conte or Gilmore in the pivot, and it worked. He had to be really well coached, I think, on some of the other areas to his job. But you got to think that switch does help Gilmore. Well, I'll segue there. Loftus-Cheek and Gallagher. So with Gilmore, I think the switch helps him. But not that he needed help. I think he was just going to be a player once fit that definitely would figure in. Frank's already showed us that. But Gilmore, we've said, you and I have said this, like he's more appropriate, in my opinion, at the 6 than a Kovacic. Because we know he can, especially depending on the opposition. Gilmore can play the 6 and play it really well. There's a lot of aspects to his game, the calmness, the ability to see forward, the tenacity in his tackle, his on-the-ground pat. Like, he can play the 6. But I actually think maybe fans don't know this. He can play the 8 as well. I think he played it once or twice for Chelsea and didn't look as good, but he can play the 8 as well. So I think that makes him just an option to play, is kind of what I'm saying. If it's a 4-3-3, it doesn't really matter where it is. And, okay, Ampadu, 4-3-3 helps him, in my opinion, but I don't know if he needed help because a pivot could help him. So if he's in Frank's plans in the midfield, either, I guess, help him. Actually, you could say the pivot helps him more because it's 2 people that then could open the options up for Ethan Ampadu. But overall, I do see the switch to the 4-3-3 helping a lot of people that aren't fully in the team yet, or maybe not in the team at all, but could be and are rated well. Tino Andrin, he is an 8. Like, he can play a lot of positions, but his dad came on my podcast maybe about a year ago, and I'm pretty sure he said specifically an 8 would be his preferred spot. He's an attacking midfielder, but he can do the midfield duties, and he's got size to him. So I think you've already said, right? You've already joked that if Loftus-Cheek just kind of disappears, Tino will just be your new Loftus-Cheek, just based on the style. So, for those people, I really think the 4-3-3 switch helps.
And the reason, and a couple of people in the chat are reminding me of Gallagher. I personally said in my 7 loanies, I wasn't too confident that he'd make it here. And the reason why is that, look, I know playing style definitely suits Frank. West Brom is doing well. I wouldn't say he's setting the world alight at West Brom. And I've always looked at our past loanies. They do need to kind of do unbelievable things. You look at Reece James, player of the year at Wigan, Tomori, player of the year at Derby. Mount obviously was loved by Frank Lampard from the beginning and had that loan at Vitesse. For me, if you're not setting the world alight, it is very difficult to come back to Chelsea and play. And what I want to kind of, and I'll get your take on this as well, Alex, I put a bit of realism back into fans, because I feel like a lot of people are looking at our midfield dynamic and thinking, right, we've got Mount, we've got Kai, we're going to have Gallagher, we're going to have Gilmore, we're going to have Ampadu, we're going to have Rice. Those players are all under the age of 22, 23. How are you going to have 6 players competing for 6 positions at that age when we already know these guys want regular game time? We know these guys want to progress their careers on the international stage. You only have to go and look at Tariq Lamptey at Brighton. He's left because Reece James is in that position. He's not going to continue to tussle with a player in the same position for his whole career. And I think fans sometimes, and this is why I'm speaking on Gallagher, we've got Tino, who I think is a bit more naturally gifted, obviously, still has to go out on loan and prove himself on the senior level. You can't have, and I'll be shocked if you do have, all of these players in the same midfield come next season or the season after, all battling it out for 3 places, all 6 of them, or all 7 of them, because we know Declan Rice is borderline joining Chelsea. I think that's quite obvious. You've got Ampadu, you've got Gilmore, who for me, those 2 are a bit more talented than Gallagher as well in their positions. So it's no shot at Gallagher, but you can't have this many players rotating at the same age in the same position. You look at Manchester City when they're bringing Phil Foden, but David Silva was on his way out. You look at Reece James and Azpilicueta, that dynamic works perfectly. You know, you look at Tammy, Giroud, that dynamic. There's reasons why you have experience mixed with youth, because it's kind of the passing of the torch. And I don't feel like all these players that we speak about in this midfield, I think that we've produced too many great youngsters for our own good, is what I'm trying to say. Alex, what's your take on what I've said there?
Well, for our own good, for them to play, but not to have extra money come in. I mean, fans need to realize, I can't echo what you just said enough. Fans need to realize that with Frank in charge, will always be a team that gives youth a chance, probably more than the next. But by giving them a chance, it means they'll get a look. And if they earn it, they will get a fair look in or chance at some point, because Frank's that type of manager. I mean, factually, especially in a non-COVID world, the academy players, some of the higher up ones, will train with the first team a lot more than they ever did. So there is that bridge there, and there is that chance. But it's time to win titles, and it's time to put the best team available on the pitch again. And a lot of those players are young, and you're seeing that Mason and Reece are already regulars, and Tammy is really not even his own fault, kind of a regular, kind of not, but fully in the mix. So it's already happening. But we can't now just project the fact that we have so many good youngsters still to come, them into the team as well. There are ebbs and flows with integrating youth, obviously. Like youth, if you have a good academy, is always going to be coming. But if Mount is still only 21, Reece is only 20, well, then you can't then just take every group of talented youngsters and then throw them into the first team, because, my God, you're not going to have any type of diversity. I don't even mean country-wise diversity, but you're just going to have all the same age players. So there has to be a balance in a squad. Now, if that player is just so damn good, well, then you have to include him, of course. Yeah. The whole point is now I think Frank is like, well, they got to force my hand. Otherwise, we're not just going to sell them silly. No, we're going to keep them in the mix. There's injuries. You never know what happens in football. I mean, we could be deep at one position, and then the next season, all of a sudden, we're not deep in that position at all. And thank God we didn't sell this youngster who's killing it on loan, because now I need him back in my team. But the way you want things constituted right now, you actually want it to be hard for the other youngsters to get in, because that means the players in their spots, whether they're young ones as well or senior ones, they're performing, and you have to have the balance. So I think right now it's so obvious what has put someone like Mason Mount and Reece James maybe ahead of others, but maybe you can debate on the specific positions and why they may have got that. But no, like Frank has showed a lot of trust in a player like Mason Mount and Reece James, not just because of their ability, but they read the game, they think the game way older than their age normally would. So that's hugely important. This is Chelsea. A lot of people who were kind of becoming anti-youth kept saying, I don't want any nursery. I'm here to win titles. Like, I don't want this to be Frank's little nursery where he gives all the youngsters a chance. No. If that was ever going to be, it was going to be last season, because you couldn't bring in players. However, no, that will get Frank sacked, and he knows that. He needs to really see not just if you're good enough, but can you handle it? Can you have the mental toughness to have a week in, week out schedule, midweek, weekend? If you have a bad game, can I trust you to not let that snowball? Like, he needs those youngsters who don't think like youngsters. And if you've watched Mason Mount and Reece James, there's nothing young about the way they view the game. So that's really important to Frank. So there are, though, Matisse, other youngsters that we have are who kind of like that. Ethan Ampadu, Billy Gilmore, those are players who definitely are beyond their years in terms of how they read the game. Hence why Gilmore already is somebody that Frank has trusted. And we don't know. I'm excited. Maybe Frank all of a sudden, I know he'll have to ease him back in fitness-wise, but maybe he trusts him in spots right from the get-go that we're not prepared for, because we know Gilmore just doesn't feel like a youngster. We know the same thing about Ampadu. So I'll say it to all of them, not directly to them, but you can show you're good one game, but you got to also show that you can actually play consistently at this level. So Tino Andrin, we know he can play. How will he handle if he gets due responsibility? I think something that hurts some players is not going out on loan. Will he ever get a loan? Did that hurt Callum not getting a loan? Conor Gallagher, I agree with you. I just don't think we can say he's definitely going to make the team, because Kai and Mason, Frank's going to want to play a crap load of the games. And then there's going to be other players who can already play the 8. So it's not a shoo-in for Gallagher. But Gallagher, he does read the game well. So he helps himself there. But at the end of the day, I don't want to put a percentage on it, but like all these youngsters we're talking about, they're still in the pipeline. More than half of them are not going to have a career for Chelsea. Just hopefully we make the right deals with them.
Yeah. And to touch on that with Frank Lampard, I've always found these little things very silly. Frank Lampard favors the English, or Frank Lampard, is going to bring through all of the youth, and he's not going to go out there and try and make Chelsea a big club in terms of who they spend money on. I think that those arguments can be blown out of the water. If you just look at Frank Lampard's playing career, as soon as he was signed, he was directly in competition because Chelsea were buying players in his position. Do you know what I mean? He's used to competition. He's used to having Ballack, Mikel, Makelele, SCN competing for spots. Frank Lampard's position was never just given to him. It was never guaranteed. It was something they had to work for. And I think if there's anything that you know about Frank Lampard from the way that he, wants his team to be run, is that no player has just got their spot just given to them just because of their name or stature. You look at the players that he's brought in. Some I've wanted, some I haven't. You've got Ziyech, you've got Kai Havertz, you've got Timo Werner. They've all spoken like Frank Lampard would when he was younger. Winning mentality, come here to win trophies on the offset. No, there's no time. They're not even giving themselves a bedding in period. I've personally given them a year to bed into this new league. They're not even giving it to themselves. They want, they're hungry to win trophies now. So I think it just goes to show the mentality that's clearly being cultured at Chelsea, and that's why certain players are being looked at, like Chilwell's, like Declan Rice. Someone's mentioned Grealish here. I think that's another great example of a player that maybe Frank Lampard would potentially like. Leadership in abundance, really. I think he's trying to put a lot of leadership back into the squad. We was before searching for captains, maybe we've got 1 or 2 in the squad. Now in the future, you could say maybe we've got 6 or 7 leaders on the pitch, and I think that's something that we've lacked, and we need to get that back. What's your take on Grealish? Because obviously doing very well for England, a very pointless media frenzy between him and Mount created by English journalists who haven't got much more to report on at the moment. We already knew those two players are nothing alike, don't even play the same position. But if Pulisic was to keep getting injured, we've spoken about Sancho last year. Do you think Grealish could be another player that would suit Frank's identity in terms of what he's about?
I take all the shots I can get, Matisse. So on that Grealish thing, by the way, props to Jack Grealish for having a brilliant post-game interview on the whole Mason Mount thing. Said a lot of things about Mount that a friend of ours said that he had to say. No. He went above and beyond, my friend. He didn't need to say half of the things he said about Mason Mount. He was just spitting facts. Okay, you're right. They're not the same position, and it never should have been a rivalry. Both good players, both different players. On Grealish, Pulisic, well, I think Pulisic should be a little concerned because Jack gets on with Mason and a handful of other of our players. He's a player that's currently not at a top team. Well, you know what I mean. No disrespect to Villa.
No disrespect to them,
he definitely would be looking based on his talent. He certainly is still waiting for that move to a bigger team. So you can't rule Chelsea out for anything these days. You can't. Yeah. And I definitely, there's a lot of debate, like what position is he? Is he a left mid? Is he a 10? Is he an 8? Is he a left forward, a left winger? I would have no problem going out there. Let's say Tammy's not starting. It's Timo up top. I would have no problem starting Jack Grealish on the left wing with Timo, Hakeem Ziyech, Mount in the 8, Chilwell. Nice little English contingent there on the left, huh? Not bad. Grealish, Mount, Chilwell could do some good stuff for club and country. And yeah, Jack Grealish is a class player, 25. He's going to be entering prime years. He's starting to find the actual productive side to his game. He's always been a player with immense quality, but he's sometimes been a player that has been asked to do so much he actually hasn't been able to put up the stats that he would want to. But he's now just really coming into his own. And I'm now a huge Jack Grealish fan after his midweek
I've always
interview.
been a Jack Grealish fan. I love that guy. He's just so saucy.
I've never disliked him. I've always thought there definitely was something different about him. And maybe some of that has been his personality. I know he hasn't had like a spotless off the pitch record, but it doesn't seem like he'd be a bad guy to bring into the dressing room. I'm not saying that. And if he gets on with some of our players, then yeah, I'm open to it. I mean, because this is Chelsea. And it sounds so corny, but if that's a player who's good, who you can project into your side, who you can probably project having a pretty smooth transition into the team, is experienced in the league, and is currently playing at not a top team, well, then you have to be interested to an extent. Now, I hope, though, Matisse, Pulisic just doesn't get injured again, and you don't have to spend money in that area like that. That's my ideal scenario. I'm still totally rooting for Pulisic to be the guy. But if the injuries still persist with Pulisic, you have to kick the tires. You have to think about it with Grealish.
Yeah, and I think Pulisic is one of my favorite players, probably top 3 in this club right now, or top 5 for sure. I've got so many that I love right now. I keep thinking of new ones every day. You got Mendy and Silva who come into the pack. They don't make it easy
I don't
for you.
even play that game. Yeah, the favorite player game. And because the whole 11 could be your favorite player at this point, and the people just say who they think my favorite player is anyway, so I don't bother.
Yeah, exactly. I like. It's very rare that I haven't played FIFA in a long time. I know you as a FIFA good. You had good FIFA ties. I'm sure you as a FIFA player back. Do you still play FIFA now? With this team, you've got to surely.
Interesting question. Yeah, no, I'm playing. I might even start streaming some of my games. Yeah, so yeah, I play.
That would be quite cool. I think, I haven't played FIFA in a long time, but I think if I was to pick up this edition, this is the first time where I'm not selling any of our first 11, or maybe even any of our bench. There's just a lot of Chelsea players right now. If I could probably
I'm selling Alonso, I'm selling Emerson, Rudiger, Christensen, Kepa.
But they wouldn't make the bench really, because there's so many. We've got so many players. Even if you used to press that recall from loan button, then it's game over. There's definitely loads of space on that bench.
True, that's true.
Not a chance. Going into, let me see, any more questions? I don't want to ignore the chat too much. You guys are saying a lot here.
I saw somebody in. Go ahead.
Go for it.
Go ahead. Well, I saw somebody write, what about a midfield of a 4-2-3-1 with Gallagher at the 10 and Ampadu and Gilmore in the pivot? I just love how people think Mason Mount is not going to start for this team. And I love how people think that Frank Lampard doesn't want to play the 4-3-3. I love how this is still a thing, Matisse. It's like, of course, Goldberg have to mention Mount, but if you want an authentic appearance from me, I will mention Mason Mount. If you're still projecting midfields, you can tell me what your preferred midfield is. But if you're predicting midfields without the 4-3-3 and without Mason Mount,
I feel like a lot.
You don't get it.
I feel like a lot of people have made their bed and lied in it with Mason Mount in terms of you can see, and I think it's quite obvious because I kept saying this. He's not a 10. He's not a winger. And for me, if we're going to play a 4-2-3-1, he shouldn't be in the team. But I've always said as well, I prefer a 4-3-3. I think it's easier for build-up play. I think the triangles just naturally make themselves. And I think it's very clear to see Mason Mount as an 8, deeper player, is a very good damn player. And I think, and I said this in a tweet, and some people took it the wrong way. If you had played Mason Mount in his position from the get-go last season, I know it wasn't possible because we had injuries. We had Willian and Pedro stinking up the pitch sometimes and loads of other factors as well. His endurance and his durability has kind of been his worst enemy because I'm sure if he was just a little bit more fragile, we'd manage him a bit better and he wouldn't play every single game, and you'd actually maybe get better output out of him sometimes. I think we spoke about that, earlier this season, Mason Mount being overplayed back to games. And this is something I want to get onto after I make this point here. But Mason Mount is an 8. Surely you can't dispute let me know what you think in the comments, but surely you can't dispute that there is serious potential there. Or is it just me? Because I've always been very clear on this topic, and I have to do this more, appease it to our players outside our club as well. Someone of that age who's made it through the whole Chelsea system, multiple loans, and still made it to this first team, there's something about them. You can't say that they're a bum and for us to take you real seriously, because you can't come through all of those trials and tribulations at the best academy in the world for me, right? With the most talented crop, so many players to choose from, so many players that could have been picked over him. For you to make it through all of that and get into this first team, you've got to have something. You surely got to see something there. And that goes for any of our youngsters, that goes for Tammy, that goes for Hudson-Odoi, that goes for any of these guys. They've got here. And I think people start judging players when they get to the first team. For me, I think you should have a level of respect for what they've done when they've got to the first team, because to get to the first team, I went to an all-boys school in London. I knew so many players that could have became footballers. I was in the same class as Joe Gomez. I saw how hard he worked. I saw how hard or lack of hard work some others put in and didn't make to the level. It all starts from Sunday League. It goes to, he made it to Charlton, now at Liverpool. There's so much hard work that goes in that people don't see. I think you've spoken to quite a few of the dads, Reece James's dad, Pulisic's dad, Mason's dad, the long hours, picking them up from training, having to, all of that stuff that people don't see, from the under 8s to the under 10s. If you think that you're going to start, for me, it's up to you. But for me, I will judge them. I will give them a very, very borderline base of respect for getting to the first team minimum. I don't know what your take is, Alex. I'm sure you agree. But that for me just has to be there, because this is not an easy sport to get into. Everybody's trying to be a footballer.
It's insanely competitive, especially now in England in the youth ranks. So people were asking Mount and other players about, are you prepared for this level of competition now that these signings are in the team? And some may not love the answer or just not think it's good enough. But Mount, and I think Reece pointed out, you got to remember, we've always been competing against the other really top young English players internationally, or our academy would still bring in players that also were not from England, and our academy brings in the best players. So we've always had to a certain extent, fight for our spot, at least more than I think fans think about it. Mount's been there since he was a kid. He's just been the starter and everything's been rosy. No, there's been insane competition all along the way. And Matisse, on Mount, all the players that get rated by maybe a younger demographic on Twitter over Mount, they're all players that are probably more aesthetically pleasing on YouTube. Okay, that's my first point. And that does kind of coincide with Jack Grealish's, if you understand football, if you know football, you understand how good Mason Mount is. But also, Mason Mount at all those youth levels, okay? Think about all the young, talented English players that we tout up, we call star boys, and we say are generational or going to be whatever. Mount was always one of the absolute best players among all of those players, often was MVP of important tournaments, often was captain. All throughout that, he was always one of those best players and one of the most talented players. But because, like I said, he runs hard and he understands the game and he's so actually dependable that he gets put in spots where it doesn't showcase him in the best way, or because even when he's an 8, Matisse, he's an industrious 8 because he understands that side of the job. We're not even getting, I know you said you're feeling those Vitesse vibes with Mount again. It's great, but we're not even getting that Mount Vitesse because that was Mount also being able to just freely express himself going forward. Mount right now is being so selfless. He's being so selfless. He is just doing everything you'd want an 8 to do. I said on the pod, sometimes playing deeper than Chilwell. So Jack Grealish's statement, what did you feel about it, Matisse? Because on the surface, people don't like statements like that. Like, if you don't like this player, you don't understand football. I don't like that logic behind it because I don't think that's totally true. However,
yeah, I've never liked
what
that.
Grealish was saying a little bit.
I understand what you're saying. I've seen
Grealish's defense, he said it. Grealish said it a bit less offensively. I just want to say he said for people that know football, you understand. He didn't say if you don't rate him, you don't know football. So at least he made it a little less rude.
I think Grealish, and England players in general are just sick and tired of being pitted against each other. It's what the media love to do. We've always had an issue with the media in England in terms of the way that they go about the English national team, from Sterling and Rooney to now Grealish and Mount, and it continues to be an issue. It doesn't really happen with other nations, but England media versus England national team has always been quite toxic. Alex has gone out there. But just to continue my point, I think, for me, and I'm going to get your thoughts on this in the chat as well. For me, the English national team and England as a whole, they've been trying to build bridges. That's why Southgate has been trying to build bridges between the media team and England for his whole stint, really, because it was quite separated and quite toxic before. But these moments always happen, especially in international break. There's not a lot to talk about. Premier League football's not on, and they will create these pointless rivalries if they can. And I think, from Frank Lampard's love for Mason Mount, Southgate's love for Mason Mount, it's all become quite a big thing. And I think players are just sick of it. So I'm not surprised to see Grealish come out and say what he said, to be honest.
But specifically on Grealish saying that if you kind of understand football, like how football works, you would rate Mount. To me, that's just Grealish saying you need to understand all the important things, all the little things that are needed for a team to win. Like those footballers out there, even the skillful ones who are playing on the wing, who we look for dribbles completed and flashy. I'm not going to swear. I'm not sure if I can, but we look for flashy stuff first from those guys. They understand that the players behind them need to do their jobs. And there's intricate things in football that, of course, don't show up in goals or assists always or on YouTube compilations. But there's so many things that take a team to do well.
To function.
And it needs to come from all players. Exactly. And I think what Grealish is really saying is, he's doing his job. He's allowing the team to function. He's doing it well. And this is a player that players really like playing with. Shouldn't we value that? Shouldn't we value
if any
favorite players
doing well? Yeah, I think if anything, Mount compliments Grealish, because as we spoke about on the pod after the game where Ziyech had a blinder and got 2 assists and really just dictated the whole game. But for me, again, you need players like Kovacic, like Mount, to make those third man runs, to do the off the ball stuff, to allow people like Ziyech to have time on the ball. It gives him more time. If you make those third man runs, someone has to track it. It gives Ziyech, it gives Kai in the future these more maybe players with more vision, maybe players that can play that killer pass more often. This is why I wanted Mount deeper, because I wouldn't say he's the master of playing the killer pass. That's always been my issue with him, playing or having the vision to play the pass for in those high areas. But he will bring, and like you said so many times, the way that he takes the ball in, moves it along, he's not going to hog it. He's going to keep things ticking over very quickly. He's gonna go into those half spaces as well and keep things going and push it to the wingers, push it and make those great switches to Reece James, I think I've seen a quote. I don't know if it was true on Instagram, but Lampard was absolutely fuming with Mount. And this just goes to show, people will say, and I want to speak on this little relationship people speak on between Frank and Mount. If they're so close, which obviously there must be, that's probably Frank going to be more harder on Mount. And I push it to, a relationship between father and son. This is something people have spoken about on Twitter so often in a banter way. But if you want to take it in this way, if they are father and son, put it that way, then probably Frank's going to be harsher on Mount than the other players. He's probably going to treat him, not treat him unfairly, but he's certainly going to give him the stick. They've known each other since the Derby days. So there's obviously trust there, but he's gonna flip out at him if he's not doing what he wants him to do. Whereas maybe other players, the new signings in particular, maybe he might be a little bit more easy with them. So I wouldn't say Mount's going to get the rub of the green with Frank, because Frank is, like you've said so many times, Frank knows this position and he knows Chelsea. He knows that this is not a position where you can mess about. You can have favorites that people say you can't piss about. Basically, you can be sacked one day and gone the next. We're not trying to be like that at Chelsea, but certainly if things were going poorly this season, I wouldn't be surprised if we finished outside the top 4 and we didn't win a trophy. Question marks would be there, of course.
Yeah, I can't say any better than you did. I'll just echo, because of their close relationship, trust me, Frank is going to feel comfortable to yell at Mason, to say things in the moment, because they have a foundation to the relationship and they both want the same thing. So yeah, father, son, we can make fun of it, but at the same time, it also means that Frank will tell Mason anything that's needed.
Yeah, yeah. Obviously, what are we at the 1 hour mark? So I'm going to wrap up in maybe the next 15 minutes. Keep your questions coming in the chat if you've got any. I want to get onto another point which was made really well earlier on. If I can find the comment, there is a little war going down in the comment section between Pulisic and his. Just anybody who's coming into the chat late. The Pulisic talk was really about, obviously, great player for me, top 2 attackers in the team right now. You probably go on form between ability from what we've seen, obviously, after lockdown. You got Pulisic, and then you got Ziyech, who's doing ridiculously well. Those, for me, are probably the top 2 right now in this team in terms of, influence and what they can do and change this team. The whole topic on Pulisic is really injuries. Is his injuries going to hamper him going forward? Is Frank potentially going to, because we know Frank will need durability. He's a very durable player. He's a very reliable player. Frank didn't really pick up any injuries himself. I can't really remember any big ones for sure. So I think, he's going to look for availability in this squad for sure. And it's going to be interesting to see if Pulisic can A, get over the injuries, which we hope, or 2, if he doesn't, what does that mean for his future, of course, in the long term? Same thing that we speak about with Loftus-Cheek and his ability. He's not playing for Fulham regularly at the moment. His future doesn't look great. Frank, let's go into this comment here. No, we'll go past that. Thank you so much. There's a lot of people in the chat looking to become moderators soon, and you guys are certainly getting there. Alex, let me get your take on Frank's season so far. What would you give it out of 10 so far, would you say?
Oh, good question. 7.5 out of 10. 7.5 out of 10. Yeah, because I just think now it's been great. Like now, everything that he did prior to the season, the signings, it's all looking almost flawless. I'm loving the 4-3-3, and I feel really positive moving forward. And I look back at the Sevilla and United games. You know this, you've heard this many times, but I look back at the Sevilla and United games where it was approached just to get a clean sheet, let's be real, and still may have done a thing or 2 differently, but I don't hate the approach. I don't hate what he was thinking there. Come on, let's get some clean sheets. Then I know my players will be able to score some goals. We scored some goals early in the season, but we also let up a lot of goals. Now let's just focus on keeping clean sheets because I know the goals will come no matter what. So I actually think Frank's recent work made his previous work look a little bit better, but I don't give it an 8 or 9, 10 out of 10 because I don't care about the table too much right now, but I think we're 5th, right? So it can't be 9 or 10. And then even though you had players not fully ready, Frank, at the start of the season, like I said, I don't know if I would have played Mount so much over on the left wing I just didn't even love the fact that he did do a 4-2-3-1 even without Ziyech. And I don't like how Rudiger got to talk his way back into the 3rd string spot. So it hasn't been flawless. So I'll give it a 7.5. But I will say when we do arrows, that 7.5 has a green arrow going up.
Yeah, for sure. That's what I would say as well. I agree. I wouldn't give it perfect. It's not been flawless for Frank so far as Chelsea manager. Definitely probably agree with you. I'd probably give it maybe a 7.5. Like those points you mentioned, like I said, the Tomori situation, Mount. For me, the main issue I had, because obviously when you understand the kind of Hudson-Odoi situation, the more and more you start to be like, for me, I still feel like he should be the guy at wing over Mount. But when there's only so many times you can fight for the same argument, if it keeps happening game after game, there must be a serious reason behind it. But when he did play Mount at left wing and Pulisic at right wing, I needed answers for that. I think that was when I finally snapped with that situation. I was like, I can't understand. Yeah, you're going to have Mount on the wing, but why not switch him to the other wing and put Pulisic in his strongest position? Just the final issue, well, to keep it balanced, the final little issue you could say on Frank, management of players fitness-wise. We're coming into a really busy time, Christmas period here. Obviously, we want continuity in the team. We want players to keep a string of games. We've kept the same back 5, including the goalkeeper, for quite some time now, which is brilliant. But certain players like Kante, are you confident that he's going to be able to manage these players from getting reoccurring injuries? Because we've had, obviously, I think at the start of last season, Emerson was rushed back as well. He got an injury. Kante, we've definitely seen injury issues before last lockdown at the end of last season. Are you confident that Frank and the medical team in particular, before we go on to Anthony Barry, are you confident that they'll be able to manage these guys throughout the season? Because our injury list has been ridiculous last season.
Not really, but I still think that obviously all these injuries weren't down to the medical team. because I'll do. I'm not going to go through every player, but I've done it before. When you go through each case of the players and the injuries, there's actually usually a pattern that started before Frank and this current staff. So that doesn't mean that now they're not managing knowing those facts and knowing the player's history. Doesn't mean they're managing it perfect. So that's why I also don't have the greatest confidence. Because also, Matisse, you mentioned Conte before any other player. No manager has ever been good at managing N'Golo Conte. Nobody.
Yeah.
So the whole status quo line, the status quo changes. I'm led to believe it stays the same with somebody like N'Golo Conte. So, it becomes a lot easier if Frank had got his DM target in Declan Rice, and maybe Billy Gilmore is somebody that can help Conte rest. That would be great. It would be great if for right now it could be a Conte Gilmore platoon if you're going to do a 4-3-3 and you rest Conte. You look at the schedule and you think, okay, this is an opponent that Gilmore could kind of do the job decent or maybe even better than decent against, and we need to get N'Golo Conte a rest here, there. So that's important. I'm really though worried about, we know Thiago Silva needs rest, obviously. I mean, that's obvious. But Zuma is now playing an absolute insane amount too. And I know he's in his prime and he's really physically fit, but he'll need rest at some point. So hopefully they're never resting at the same time. And if they are resting at the same time, oh my God, whatever center back battery, and I like Fick, but whatever center back battery you'd have, I wouldn't feel okay with, because once you now are talking about two of Rudiger, Christensen, and Tomori, we got issues. So can Frank at least manage it so Zuma and Silva are never resting at the same time? Because we know what you and I would want. We would want, all right, fine, Silva's resting today. Well, pair Fick with Zuma. And Zuma's resting today? Pair Fick with Thiago. Let him learn from the senior players. So that's what we would do. So on the fitness thing, I'm not overly confident, but it's not all down to Frank. Some of it is, but some of it is actually just based on those players like Pulisic. Come on, wherever he's going to be, that's our biggest concern. That's our only concern with Pulisic, his injuries. So I'm not fully, I'm not, like, I think actually my biggest fear this season is what happens if this team gets injuries in the wrong spots. Because if they don't, my God, these predictions
like
of
a great team.
Chelsea maybe actually wouldn't. Yeah, and with Liverpool, everything that's going on with them, maybe we could win the Premier League. However, if we get injuries in the wrong spots, we're screwed. Yeah,
no, I couldn't agree more. And I think it's going to be very interesting to see how Frank manages, the rotation. I think Kovacic, what I really like is, regardless of who comes out the team very recently, like I said with Frank, I want to see longevity in the formation and not keep chopping and changing between formation time and time again throughout the season. So hopefully he does stick with the 4-3-3, because that was a big concern of a lot of fans, that he kept changing formation so often. Sometimes it needed to be done because of personnel. Think of last season with Alonso, you kind of have to go to a back three if you want to keep any sort of defensive stability. But at the same time, now with this big bolstered squad, I'd hope he'd stay with the 4-3-3. And I think it's really clear to see that he's not going to sacrifice the formation for players anymore. It's going to be players sacrificing themselves for the formation, which is really good to see. And I think Kovacic in the last game really highlights that. The last thing I want to speak about is Anthony Barry. How much credit do you give to him for the defensive improvement, or would you say it's him and Frank? Because a lot of people have said, it's all Anthony Barry and you can't really give Frank any credit. I think at the bare minimum, you give Frank credit for at least acknowledging that he needed to bring in a defensive coach and actually doing it. That's not a given. He didn't have to do that. And they've obviously selected the right person. Whoever selects the staff, maybe it's Petr in his role, whoever it is, they've selected a great guy from Wigan, probably off the radar for a lot of top clubs as well. So how much credit do you give to Frank or would you say Anthony Barry has been the clear shift? Because I'd say coaching defensively is not easy. You can't just pick it up so quickly. There must be an element of Anthony Barry to this.
There has to be. And everything I've heard, it's glowing reports on him. The minute he was hired, he started coaching. He just got fully into it. He really took a liking to Kurt Zuma, who, by the way, really helps on set pieces on both sides of the ball. Zuma, we know how good he is on both sides of the ball with set pieces. So Barry, also somebody that Nigel James, Reece James's father, said on my podcast, because, of course, he knows Anthony Barry from the Wigan days. That's where he came from. He said that he's a really smart technical coach. He understands the game really well. He also communicates the game really well to other players. Anthony Robinson, left back now for Fulham, who had Anthony Barry, texted me and said, my God, he's like the best communicator there is. He makes every player individually better. But apparently also he's just really good at coaching certain segments of the game. So I think he has really, really helped probably with defensive structure, defending set pieces. I don't think he'd class himself as a true defensive coach, but he's a coach and he just understands the game. And maybe Frank did see, when he was allowed to go pick a coach, something in Anthony Barry that could help them specifically, perhaps in the defensive phase. But I'll just say, if I know he communicates well with players, he coached from day one, meaning he just got into it from day one. He's really good with everybody in terms of communication, and he took a liking right away to Kurt Zuma, who's maybe our key on set pieces, and alongside with Thiago Silva, just defending overall with Mendy behind him. I think Anthony Barry, we don't fully know how much he's to credit, but I'll give him a crap load.
Yeah, 100%. And do you know what it is? Regardless of who, I think you have to give Anthony Barry a lot of the credit, but regardless, it's just great to see. And I said this so often on your pod as well. I want to see Frank surround himself with experience. If he's not a specialist in certain areas, which he won't be because he's a very young manager, surround yourself with someone who is. Surround yourself with help yourself. And obviously, in turn, that helps the team. Guys, we've reached the end of the stream. Thank you so much to Alex for coming on as the guest to speak on Frank Lampard. Couldn't really think of anyone better. You know, you've been a trooper for this transition of Chelsea now with the youth coming through, Frank Lampard getting his chance. You've been a trooper of this from day one. Anything you want to plug, you know, maybe a little pod here and there that we're a part of.
Yeah, I mean, check out the Byline. Reece and I are loving the post pods we're doing after every Chelsea game, 2 hours after. It's quite structured already. People are really looking forward to these specific pods, not just my pod in general. So we're having a great time. It almost feels like a true series because we're just speaking so often and we're just picking up from one event to the next, aka Chelsea game. So that's probably reason enough to join the Byline, but international break, different types of content. So I got ex-West Ham employee coming on the pod tomorrow on Sunday, who, if you don't know him, he got everything right transfer-wise with Chelsea stuff. He's very in the know, a little mysterious. He goes by X, but yeah, just check it out. And hey, maybe I'm doing FIFA streams soon. So there you go.
That would be fun. That would be fun. I might have to pick up a PS5 at some point because the game's coming out right now. Watch Dogs in particular. When you set a scene, when Rockstar make a game in London, you capture me. I'm not gonna lie, you do tingle me a little bit. You forced my hand. Thank you guys for the chat. You've been really great. Honestly, as usual, you're always active in here, putting in great questions. Some chats I go on other YouTube channels, they're spamming and you need moderators and everything. We're going to get moderators, but you guys are so great anyway. There's not really much to moderate. So the moderators, when we do select them, are going to have an easy time managing this chat. Catch us again tomorrow. I'm going to be putting up a video. I'm not sure what yet. It could be a little challenge. I don't know. I might spice things up. Obviously, the roundabout back on Monday as per usual. And God hope that this international break speeds up a little bit. It's taking up too much time. Not only are players at risk of catching the disease at the moment when they're out of their clubs, it's just more likely to catch it when you're mingling with others. But also, international football is just not club football. It's not Chelsea. I try my best. England did put on a great performance the other day, but it's not the same. So hard up the Chelsea. Hopefully they come back soon in the coming weeks now. And I'll see you guys next time. See you later.